Welcome to the Nomiki Show. I am Nomiki Const. On day 106 of self-quarantine. And here we are. We're not even done with the first wave. I'm in Arizona. This is a special show this week because I'm leaving. I'm going back to New York. For those who've been following along the way, I have been self-quarantining, isolating in Arizona with my family and taking care of loved ones who are immunocompromised. But I got to get back to New York because I have an apartment. And so I have my own business to deal with. It's been nerve-wracking because like so many other folks who have been separated from their families, from their homes, have been caught in places, whether intentionally or not, it's really hard to figure out how to get back home. And now Tucson, where I've been, as much as the rest of Arizona, is the hotspot for COVID. I went from Queens, one hotspot, to another. And it's alarmingly apparent that it is related to the lack of leadership in this state, how the right-wing state government, the governor, insisted on prematurely opening up the economy, and how folks here, because they hadn't been personally affected by COVID, were denying that it exists and still are denying it exists. And as a result, you had a lockdown here. We had curfews to a sudden opening up of the economy where people are getting together in mass gatherings, going to mega churches, to Trump rallies. And now you have an alarming rate of COVID cases with no hospital beds or ventilators, the way that we saw a few weeks ago in other parts of the country with big cities. It's undeniable that it's tied to the economy opening up, and they didn't have phases of opening it up. And there are people, of course, like the rest of the country, who refuse to wear masks. So I am about to take a flight to New York, and I will be covering myself in all the ways I can with a regular medical mask and a bandana and then a plastic covering on top, because this is the new normal. And I'm hoping that when I arrive, everyone around me is safe getting off the plane and that we're okay. But it's unfortunate that we're not even done with the first phase. And this is expected to go on much longer because there are a group of people in this country who refuse to take personal responsibility in that they affect other people's lives. And I think this is about something much, much deeper in that. Remember when Donald Trump got elected and folks were like, well, how could they believe what he was saying? How could a segment of the population that may have actually voted for Barack Obama at one point suddenly vote for Donald Trump? And it all came down to the Rust Belt. The Rust Belt, which had their jobs, pushed out of the country, really, in favor of trade deals, but not to Mexicans, not to people of color, the way Donald Trump pointed his fingers. It was because of neoliberal and neoconservative trade deals. And Trump was critical of those as well. But what happened was Donald Trump used the economic anxiety of a group of folks who were older, who came up in a different era, and he pointed at the others. This is a classic case. They do this, this has happened throughout history. It is a tool of fascism. You point at the others so that whatever insecurity you are feeling in your life, you can point it to somebody else so you could feel a little bit more control. Now, here we are in COVID, and the masks have become another form of that. For people to say, oh, I can't breathe because of the mask, or it's infringing on my freedom. I mean, there's so many ridiculous arguments being made right now by these COVID deniers. But it really is a symbol of something else. If you look at the folks who are angry about government forcing mask use or businesses forcing mask use, they tend to be, there's an overlap between the folks who are angry at the protesters for all of the extreme COVID deniers who are saying that they can't breathe with a mask. I wonder how many were listening to I Can't Breathe when countless Black men and women have been brutalized by the police, who are put into chokeholds. Or I Want My Mommy. Were they hearing that at that time? Oh no, but they were violating the law. That's their excuse. They were violating the law. It was justified. Well, now you are violating the law. You are violating the law. But we, the believers in science, we will not push that kind of pressure on you. We don't act the way the worst people in society do. They're exercising their lack of control, their lack of power in their own lives in the most extraordinarily dangerous way. They know. It's like a God syndrome. They know they're not using a mask is a way to exercise control in a situation that is extraordinarily out of control. That is the backdrop of Black Lives Matter protests. It's the backdrop of economic anxiety. They're using this little thing that they think they can control. And unfortunately, it is affecting our public safety. So what is it going to take for our government? What is it going to take for folks to show up and wear masks, whether kindly asked or not? I went into a drugstore today, and there was a woman not wearing a mask. And when she went to go purchase her goods at the counter, the lovely woman, the salesperson, said, next time you show up, you have to wear a mask. It's by law. This is in Arizona. And the woman says, well, I have a lot of breathing issues and I can't do it. Stay home. Stay home. You are putting everybody around you at risk. You are putting my family members at risk, even though I have my mask on. Stay home. I can't believe how many times we have to say this to people. You wear a wet mask, I wear a mask. The risk of transaction goes down up to 80%. The protests that were all over the country where most people were wearing masks compared to the Trump rallies. And you see that the protests did not lead to a spike in cases. If you're not wearing a mask, stay home. It is mind-boggling to me how many people, despite the abundance of information and news coverage, still do not understand how this disease, how this virus is transmitted. Why do we have to keep repeating this? The most vulnerable people in this country are at risk because of the most ignorant people. Stay home if you don't wear a mask. You've got Amazon, and I don't usually advocate for using Amazon if you have to buy whatever it is. If you feel out of control in your life, maybe this isn't the aspect where you should exert control. Just saying. On this week's show, we have Linette Lopez, who talks to us about Elon Musk and how he runs his businesses. She's been covering Elon Musk for the last few years, and she covers Wall Street as well. She's a big critic of the doings of Wall Street, and she does great reporting for Business Insider. And then afterwards, we have artist Awkword, who has organized a set of demands with other activists against our government, our city government, urging them to take quick, vast action to lead us towards abolition. So it's a really interesting show. I'll be chiming in from New York throughout the week, so make sure to check in on our live streams every Tuesday and Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific on our YouTube channel. If you're not already, please join us on Patreon at patreon.com/The Nomiki Show for as low as $5 a month. And we now have swag, we have stickers, and we have tote bags. I'll grab one down here. For those of you watching on camera, we have these really cool tote bags. Go to thenomikishow.com, and we have mugs as well. Elon Musk gets a lot of attention. He's been hailed by many in the media, in the mainstream media, as a genius, a visionary. And, he's also pretty spicy on Twitter for being someone who supposedly is going to send us to Mars. But there's been recent reporting showing he really may not be any of those things, and that could just be a brand. Like, we're shocked. Obviously, we're not shocked here on the show. There is definitely a political mindset that libertarians have, and they've put into these big companies and these startups and cryptocurrency, and this is something that we address and we talk about on the show all the time. My friend Linette Lopez has been covering Elon Musk for a while now, has even gotten to some tiffs with him online, which is awesome work because she's also spicy. Linette is a columnist at Business Insider, and we're going to talk a little bit about what's the latest controversy with Elon Musk.
What isn't the latest controversy with Elon Musk? Saying that I was in a tiff with him is I feel like tiff is the wrong word when you have 20,000 followers on Twitter and the person who's yelling at you has 22 million followers on Twitter. It's less a tiff than it is like a full-on stomp. But that's fine. I still
thought you won.
Yeah, thanks. But I was just doing my job, and my job is to report what's going on at Tesla. I started in 2018 because I got a tip from an employee inside Tesla who Musk is now suing, actually, for talking to me, and have continued to break news on the company ever since. The two stories that I broke in the last year that I think are most relevant to the company are one about SolarCity, which, as you know, Tesla owns, and one about the car company Tesla itself. The SolarCity story is from this fall. And what I revealed is that for years, Tesla has had a secret operation inside the company called Project Titan, where it would clandestinely switch out a faulty part on many of the solar panels on its customers' roofs. Now, the solar panels are not made by Tesla. They're made by a Chinese company named Trina. And the problem was that the Trina panels were connected to these heat regulators made by a company called Amphenol, and the heat regulators were not working. So then the Trina panels would overheat. And what do you have? You have an overheating fire, or an overheating solar panel. In many cases, you have a fire. And this came to light because Walmart started suing Tesla because it had 7 fires on its roofs at Walmarts across the country. In one Walmart, they had to shut down operations for 2 weeks. So naturally, Walmart was pissed. And Tesla wanted to keep this very under wraps because while Elon Musk is very litigious, he tends to punch down. He doesn't want to get in fights with Walmart. So as I was writing about that case, someone inside the company reached out to me and divulged this Project Titan situation to me. And the Walmarts in question actually did have the faulty connectors on the roof, as not thousands of commercial and residential customers across the country. Some have signed NDAs so that they do not talk about the fires in their house. I've written a story about a woman in Colorado whose house almost burned down because of one of these faulty connectors.
Wow.
And so that to me is an extremely important story that really homeowners should pay attention to. And a lot of these homeowners bought their houses with Tesla solar panels on them. They didn't really know the company, they didn't agree to this. But sometimes the leasing requirements can be very onerous. And so I think they should know, and they should be able to pay attention to what's going on at the company going forward, because the story is material to what will happen to Elon and his future. Right now, Elon is facing a lawsuit from shareholders who are alleging that his whole purchase of SolarCity was done in bad faith, which is why the Project Titan.
Just as a little bit of a background here. So Elon Musk is the chair of, what is his role in Tesla, and how does SolarCity fit within Tesla, or is it a separate entity?
Tesla purchased SolarCity in an all-stock deal.
Okay.
Elon was on the board of SolarCity, and his cousin was the CEO. And his brother was also on the board. His brother is on the board of Tesla.
Obviously.
Elon is no longer the chairperson of Tesla, but he is the CEO of the company. So when Tesla bought Solar City, what Tesla sold was, look, it's going to be a vertically integrated, renewable energy. We're going to Mars. We're building, hyperloops. We're doing all this stuff at Tesla. That was the selling point. And one of the specific selling points right before shareholders said, yeah, let's definitely buy Solar City, was that Elon did this big Hollywood production and unveiled this gorgeous roof that was just like one sheet of renewable energy, the solar roof tiles. And everybody saw it. It was like, this is amazing, yada, yada. Now, what people didn't realize was going on behind the scenes was that there was no solar roof, and there still is no solar roof. And
so it was a prop?
It was a prop.
This is like Elizabeth Holmes stuff. Like, here's our little, there's nothing there, we don't have the product yet.
And yes, so not only was there a prop, but Project Titan was already underway at this time. So they knew they had this huge problem where thousands and thousands of commercial residential customers could have the roof catch on fire. They also knew that Solar City was in the hole. It was about to go bankrupt and desperately needed to be saved. Elon's family had taken out loans against Solar City shares. And so they had to save the company, and they saved it by convincing Tesla's shareholders to purchase it in bad faith. And that's what the lawsuit is about. So that is ongoing. Tesla's board settled the lawsuit for $60 million, but Elon refuses to settle. So,
wait, so hang on, because I'm confused. It's just a little bit confused here. So he pushes, I'm also, I don't frequent, reporting on corporations like you. You're very, very skilled at this. You've been covering Wall Street for a long time now. Probably one of the best I've read in terms of really understanding the dynamics and getting sources. And I think that's a really important thing to note here, is that you were able to develop this story through just like really hard reporting. And what confuses me though is, okay, so you have the shareholders who are basically forced in bad faith, but like, were they not told about this, about the faulty solar panels, or?
No.
Okay. So
that didn't come out till the fall of 2019.
Got it. And then now you're saying that they settled, he refuses to. How can he get away with refusing to?
Well, I don't think that, I don't think he was keen on settling. Elon Musk is not keen on settling cases in general. He likes to win, even when the odds are completely and totally against him. He has to win at all costs. When that diver sued him for slander because he called the guy a pedophile.
Wait, remind us what that story was.
Oh my gosh. Jeez, there's just so much going on in Tesla world that I have to. Okay, so let me get a timeline for you.
Okay.
So Tesla bought Solar City in 2017 officially. My story about these faulty connectors came out in 2019, just to get the timeline straight. In the summer of 2018, remember those Thai kids got stuck in a cave? And Elon said that he was going to send little mini submarines in, which looked ridiculous. And this guy, this English royal accolade, British government toot toot diver saved the kids, and then afterwards said that Elon Musk's idea was stupid. And then Elon went on a Twitter tirade and called the guy a pedophile and wouldn't recant. Then the guy sued him, and somehow Elon won that lawsuit. So it's just like this guy really always skirts the line. He lied about taking his company private for $420 a share in 2018. Yeah, he just does stuff and gets away with it. So he just keeps doing stuff. And I think, when you give a moose a muffin, it's going to ask for a glass of milk. It's just going to do more and more and more. So Elon's always doing the most. Okay. And his shareholders settled for $60 million. insurance paid that out and then said goodbye. So the board of Tesla is no longer insured for legal issues. So Elon stepped up and he's insuring them personally, which is a crazy conflict of interest. How are you going to say anything against the man who is paying your legal bills? But, you know, the SEC is not the most active these days. And he seems to not have a problem getting them to say yes to whatever he says. I mean, look, he opened the Tesla factory in Alameda County early, despite the coronavirus. California is having a second surge. It is a massive factory, 10,000 employees, and he didn't care. And he's still on Twitter fighting with epidemiologists after he said that America wouldn't have a problem by the end of April. This is just lunacy. So anyway, I hope that wasn't too much.
No, this is I think it's really fascinating because, you know, from the political perspective, he's come out with he has a very clear perspective on politics and science, and, you know, COVID being the perfect case. But it overlaps. I mean, it's clearly business oriented, and it overlaps with exactly what you're saying. He's disregarding science, he's disregarding facts, he's taking extraordinary risks, all which are ultimately hurting people. So it's actually the same. I mean, if you're continuing to operate as if, first off, straight up lying to your shareholders about a product that works when it doesn't even work, it doesn't even function yet, and then they're forced by pressure, essentially, and leverage to buy out that company. I mean, this is cuckoo town. It's
cuckoo town. And, you know, the Buffalo plant, that's supposed to be making all the solar panels, they're not really doing much over there.
So, all right, so that's a solar panel. What's going on with Tesla? Because, you know, I painfully listened to the last Joe Rogan interview with Elon Musk. It was hard. Joe Rogan loves Elon Musk. Let's just say that. Praises him, says he's genius. He makes great products. And I don't know how many times he said, man, you just make great products. And like, they got really nerdy about cars and going to space and you know, on another planet. Please go to Mars because that's where your head is.
No one is stopping you.
No one's stopping you. You go on your own on one of your, you test out that. But he, you know, I'm shocked by how many people say his products are really great, like they're built great. And this story is mind-blowing. The fact that he could know and consciously keep producing these cars, knowing internally in the company that he could be killing and risking people's lives. Can you explain a little bit like how this came about and where the investigation is right now?
Yeah, this is my second story that I said, you know, that I think really is emblematic of Tesla this year. And I published this one recently. In 2012, when Tesla was delivering its first Model S's, which is, you know, the luxury sedan that Tesla designed, Tesla knew that the cooling system of the battery was faulty. And it was faulty such that there could be leaks, and those leaks would leak a coolant into the battery that would either cause the battery to just stop, like brick, you're driving along, coolant leaks into the battery, boop, boop, car's dead. Or the coolant could not brick the battery and leave a residue, and that residue is flammable. So it could be lead to a fire. I have been reporting this story for almost 2 years, because while I did have documentation and I had a single source, it was very difficult to get people inside the company to talk about this situation, because this is a design flaw. So while not every single part will have this issue, every single part could have this issue. So they realized that this was a design flaw starting in the spring of 2012. They had the part tested by two third-party metallurgic and consulting firms. Both firms were like, this is not going to fly. It's a design problem. Tesla went ahead and pushed the car through anyway, selling the car to customers because they were behind schedule. And even as the customers were rolling out of the factory, I was seeing emails as late as December 2012 saying, look, the part is leaking on the conveyor belt in the assembly line. It's leaking. And this is a very costly thing that happens to Tesla, because Tesla, they kind of do their design and engineering process all in one jumble, where traditional automakers would come up with a plan, they would test every single part would be stress tested, then they would do a test run of manufacturing, and then after that test run went perfectly, they would start making cars en masse. Tesla doesn't do that. It all happens at once, the design, the engineering, everything. And so there are mistakes. I've reported on other mistakes before. There's been a mistake with the alignment called the Wompy wheel problem, where sometimes wheels in the Model S would go out of alignment, and then a wheel would just kind of fly off the car. I mean, these are known issues. And the problem is that Tesla is supposed to report these issues to the NHTSA, which is the agency that sort of oversees them, but they don't. So my last story about the battery spurred an NHTSA investigation. They're going to start looking into it because it's something that when Tesla knew about it, they would have had to let the NHTSA know within 5 days, because this is something that would require a recall. The issue now is that Tesla has a new model that it's selling called the Model Y. And you would think that 8 years later, they would figure out how to finesse the manufacturing process, especially since the Model Y is just a slightly bigger version of their last car, the Model 3. So, Elon was talking big game, like, this manufacturing process is going to be easy. We're going to get this one right. But as the Model Y is being delivered, we're seeing customers freak out because there are missing seat belts. There are back seats that aren't put together correctly. The paint is shoddy. And those are the problems that you can see. So the question is, what are the problems that you can't see? And the battery issue was a problem that you could not see, but extremely material. So to me, the question is, when is Tesla going to change? When are they going to care about safety? When are they going to care about the customers? When are they going to care about getting the manufacturing process right? It isn't just dangerous for the people who are inside of Teslas. It's dangerous for the people that are driving behind them. The thing that he calls autopilot is not an autopilot. People overuse it. It is guided assistance, just like you would get in a BMW or any other car that has. So the way that he markets these products, it's not reality. And because he has such an extremely loyal, almost religious fan base who believe that he can do no wrong, they say, well, autopilot's not perfect, but everyone knows that. Like, blah, blah, blah. Tell that to the gentleman who died in Mountain View, California, because his autopilot was faulty, and it kept swerving him into a divider in the highway. And finally, one day, he couldn't move the car quickly enough and crashed and died. Tell that to people who are really, really, I'm consistently shocked by the number of accidents and fires that people see and still tolerate, and the defects that people have in their own Teslas, and say, I love the car. It's a perfect car. But so there's a bit of cognitive dissonance there from the Elon fans. They're the first people to tell you that he is the greatest, he's a genius, blah, blah, blah. And when they get the car, you have a good 30-minute conversation with them, and you find that it's in the shop a lot. The insurance is really high because insurers understand that these cars are not a Toyota. It's not reliable. And so once you start talking to people for a little while, the whole this is a perfect car thing starts to break down, and you see that they're just kind of glossing over these problems because they really believe in the mission so much.
Right. It's interesting. So, like, okay, they were conscious of of the fact that there was this problem and they did nothing. I mean, that I think is what is critical here is car companies regularly have issues with defects, but they immediately have to do recalls. They have, to take the car in. Toyota, remember, there were lots of issues with the Priuses a few years ago. This is common, but the big question is whether they were conscious of it before it became a problem. So what could potentially happen to Tesla if some oversight agency or someone sues them, frankly, for wrongful death if they're not already doing so? Is there any sort of accountability? Like, where does this end if it were to go right with justice?
I think that Tesla would have to issue a recall. That's what I think. I don't know when the problem that I'm reporting on ended. One of my sources says 2016, but I don't have additional data to back that up. If that's the case, then every Model S made from 2012 to 2016 should be inspected, should be recalled, should have the battery completely replaced. It's expensive, and I think that's why Tesla doesn't want to do it. And the company has never made money annually,
right,
in its 15-year existence, and it consistently it's one of those Wall Street companies that bankers love because they're always doing financial deals. They're always raising more debt or issuing stock, or it's a very active financial company. And in fact, I would say that the two things Elon understands the most are marketing and how to play the financial market.
Is this a Theranos?
No, they have a product.
That's true. Fair enough.
They have a product. It just isn't what people say it is, and it doesn't make money. And Elon isn't who he claims to be.
Last, before we wrap up, can we talk a little bit about his politics and how much of that you think guides, or what's steering what, and how much there's this little world of Elon fans and founders like him who seem to be very there's a set of politics. And
yeah, Silicon Valley is just ugh. Every time I go there, it's that scene in Monty Python and the Holy Grail where they go to Camelot and King Arthur kind of looks around and he's like, let's get out of here. This is a silly place. That's
yes.
They do the dance of the Knights of the Round Table dance, and King Arthur's like,
yeah,
no.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about Silicon Valley. Yeah, Elon is very much the libertarian, blah, blah, blah. But I also think that he's just about survival in a way that Mark Zuckerberg very much also is. He will back any politician that serves him, anybody who's willing to give him more subsidies, which Tesla gets a lot of subsidies from the federal government, other car companies, and the state of California. So without which it definitely wouldn't be able to survive. Excuse me. So I think that Elon is more interested in playing the game. He kept his factory open during the coronavirus because he needs to make cars, or else his company is sunk. He can't afford to have bad quarters. So I think his politics are about expediency, and he's an extremely self-centered person. So that lends itself to libertarianism very well. If you are not emotionally mature enough to handle other people's problems, needs, wants, desires, or to accept that the world doesn't go your way all the time, then you kind of see how it all fits together in the politics and the personality type.
And colonizing Mars. It's a whole other conversation.
Like I said, on that endeavor, I wish him all the luck.
Lynette, super interesting. Check out Lynette's reporting in Business Insider. She's a columnist. She's covered Wall Street for years, and she also of course, covers Elon Musk now, which he loves.
Yeah, anything that has to do with scammers. So, also President Trump, who is the biggest scam being perpetrated on the world stage right now. Yeah. So, I mean, it's very hard to look at him and not see just a New York con artist.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many parallels, like as you're telling the Elon Musk story, and just, I mean, the solar panels. It's, Donald Trump selling a bridge to nowhere. I mean, it's crazy. It's just selling his brand that's latched onto this. It's the story of these entrepreneurs who are given every access point to wealth, to producing, their ideas, and the buffers. I mean, it's just amazing when you look at like how women are treated, who do startups, and the types of questions they're asked, with exception to Elizabeth Holmes, and compare them to like the men who nobody asks along the way, how do you think you're going to be able to get to Mars? I mean, just from the beginning. And so as a result, they've built this ecosystem around them of yes men and fans and cults, followers, that I just don't see happening when it comes to people who, frankly, women, without a doubt, and people of color who start businesses and operate in the world. They're just dealt with different screening and questions and frankly, reporting.
So we can ask questions right back. That's what we're going to do.
Thank you for watching and listening to the Nomiki Show. Make sure to click like and subscribe on YouTube and share with everybody on social media. And of course, if you're not a patron already, please join us on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show for as low as $5 a month. That money makes a huge difference. We don't have the corporate money coming in. We're not cable news that's raking in the dough from advertisers right now as everybody's sitting at home and watching. It is really you guys who are keeping us together. So please consider being a patron. And for those of you who have already, we are incredibly grateful to you. With the uprisings that are happening around the country, organizations, groups, activists are putting very clear demands on politicians. As we know too well, most of the big cities in which we are having these issues with police departments and police unions are led by Democrats. Many of them almost solely Democrats. In New York in particular, we have a Democratic mayor who just went through budget cuts and was basically there protecting police unions, and activists are outraged. They have put forward several different types of demands. Our next guest is Awkword, a lifelong social justice activist. He's a 20-year abolitionist, and he is the co-founder of 10 Demands and co-creator of 10 Demands for Justice, The Road to Abolition. Thank you so much for joining us and for putting this forward. Tell us a little bit about the 10 Demands.
So as it relates to the efforts to defund NYPD, this actually takes it a step further in a number of ways. The biggest thing is that this is national. We have specific demands that are, comprehensively outlined, that are requests in a lot of ways for long-term solutions, but also immediate demands that we expect to happen right away. And mostly at the federal, the state, and municipal levels. So in that way, it differs in that it's not just targeting a specific city, but also beyond that, we're not speaking of simply defunding, cutting it by $1 million. We want to start with defunding. That's kind of the bottom line. And then it goes a step further. That's why it's called the road to abolition, because in addition to ending discriminatory policing and mass incarceration, at the end goal is to actually create a new system and a new society based on mutual aid and community, where we don't need police, we don't have police, and we don't need prisons or have prisons.
You have a great coalition as I look at the website here, several friends of the movement. You have, quote from Angela Davis of all people. How did you build this coalition? Can you talk a little bit about who is part of the coalition?
Sure. Well, just to clarify, I have not had contact with Angela herself. She's someone that I have for a long time looked up to. Her book, Our Prison's Obsolete, is kind of the what started this all for a lot of abolitionists. And her work that preceded that as well. So we are kind of working off of what she has spoken about for years, as well as a number of other Black leaders and Black women in particular who are greatly impacted by policing and by mass incarceration, and who have led this abolitionist movement for decades. The coalition itself kind of started organically at the end of May. As you said, I've been doing this for many years. I was part of a program where I spent a lot of time at Greenhaven Maximum Security Prison, meeting with incarcerated people and exchanging ideas. I successfully lobbied for the repeal of the Rockefeller drug laws in New York, where you and I both live. But the group itself is really a collection of leftist activists. And someone approached me with the concept, and that individual ended up kind of backing away because she wanted to limit it to defunding at most. And I was a strong proponent of taking it, that, like I said, the step further to full abolition. And so it ended up being 12 of us who for weeks worked on iteration after iteration, consulting with leaders from the Black community, the Indigenous community, other abolitionists that I know, to develop these 10 demands. And we continue to work together today, both to promote it. We're currently working on printing a massive amount of flyers, which we're then going to distribute across the nation, targeting some specific key cities first, to get them in the hands of protesters, to kind of give them something to talk about, and to, some strategy to put behind their anger and their need for justice.
No, I mean that's it's actually brilliant. I mean, so much of what came out of the movement was initially it was confusion over like what should we put forward? How do we? I think for a lot of folks, there's a sensitivity to criticizing Democrats and putting pressure on Democrats because in many cases, many of the organizations that probably would have taken the lead on this are intrinsically tied to these Democrats in the city. They are in these cities. They're fighting for budget reforms on different items. They're working with them. They're endorsing them. They're helping them with their campaigns in many cases. And it's been there have been so many roadblocks and stumbles along the way because the folks that we would normally go to for leadership on this and organizing, and they've got the membership to disperse this information, are just kind of sitting there with their hands tied.
Yeah. And, in a lot of ways, it doesn't surprise me because, while we have a number of really fantastic endorsers who are running or have run as part of the Democratic Party, they are true progressives. And the majority of the Democratic Party is not. Part of the system of mass incarceration, is a profit motive. That's why it's called the criminal the prison industrial complex. And these same corporations that are profiting both off of private prisons, but one thing that people don't even know about is profiting off of state and federal prisons as well, through slave labor at 4 cents an hour, as well as providing food and clothing and bed sheeting or whatever to prisons. These same corporations are the ones whose lobbyists are lobbying congressional leaders on both sides of the aisle, and who are donating in large amounts to their campaigns. So we are not looking for the traditional forms of leaders or leadership to help us with this, although we're hoping that the Democrats would be the first to kind of adopt it in the way some of these more progressive leaders are. And we also are not expecting that reform, any type of reform, is going to be the solution. So typically, no matter what side of the aisle it's been criminal justice reform. And time again, that hasn't worked. Abolition is about demolishing this system entirely and creating a new system that would, in a lot of ways, if we just decriminalized poverty, if we decriminalized immigration, if we decriminalized street crimes and crimes about use of public space, we would clear out prisons. If we removed or if we eliminated cash bail, tons of people who are catching COVID in jail right now would be home with their families, and communities would be better off. So we're looking for, much more than just what Democrats or Republicans are willing to put on the table themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I ran for public advocate, we had so many criminal justice forums, and I talked to a lot of leaders in this space, including one who was actually, he helped advise our campaign on this, behind the scenes. He was talking to me quite a bit about this, was Janos Martin, who's running for DA in Manhattan. I was really kind of blown away with the resistance on some of like the most basic things, like releasing nonviolent elderly offenders who are taking up a majority of our prisons right now and are at absolutely no risk of being integrated back into society, especially if they're nonviolent. And, I mean, it's mind-blowing, like the cost it has on society, the cost it's on taxpayer costs, whatever. You want to frame it from whatever context you want to frame it to win the argument. But it just seemed like such an easy negotiation point.
Except for the fact that certain people want other certain people to remain in prison. In addition to the profit motive, there's just the reality of the fact that in the 19th century, much of the conversation around the Negro problem in dealing with slaves, the concept was shipping them back to Africa. Prisons in its modern sense was created right out of that. So it's still a primary goal is to remove the people that they don't want to be around, that they don't consider equal to them, in a place where they're hidden and they're treated inhumanely, and they are profiting off of them. It's very clear that even though the term penitentiary comes from the concept of penitence, there is no actual purpose there for that, and there's no methods for rehabilitation. The stripping of prisons, from having access to Pell Grants is one example where we're not trying to educate these people so that they can come out. We want them to stay exactly as they are and as far away as possible, but it's interesting you mentioned Janos because he is actually one of our endorsers. And he said as a DA, like, it's really powerful for me to have, and us, I should say, to have someone like him endorsing it, because it shows that there is a possibility out there. Like, I hope we end up at a place down the road where the DA's office is not even necessary. But in the meantime, what he said today publicly was that he's happy to endorse, and he wants to start by ending the war on drugs. That's something that he would implement right away. And you're absolutely right about what you said about elderly people. In our 10th demand for ending carceral punishment, we say free everyone from jails, prisons, youth facilities, detention centers, but begin immediately with the elderly, the disabled, the immunocompromised, nonviolent offenders, and undocumented immigrants. Criminalize survivors. There's tons of women who are in prison for protecting themselves against their abusers. People who are there on bail and parole violations. People who are there for, being political prisoners. There are a ton of people who are not there because they're so-called dangers to our society. And this should be easy. But of course, there is this other reason. But we can go even further into, because the question is always, what about the rapists and the murderers? We have answers for that too.
Right, and it's you could look at many Nordic countries where their prison percentage-wise to the population is very low, and it is like the most violent, dangerous members of society who, are on another level. Janos is great. He's been on their show. I think what's really inspiring about his campaign, especially in light of today's, as at the time of this taping, Ghislaine Maxwell was just arrested. and she's being tried, and we'll see how that goes. But so much of that DA's office was protecting people like Ghislaine and Epstein and Harvey Weinstein. If we recall, Cy Vance, who's the Manhattan DA, I mean, it's just fascinating to see like how much is political in these offices, and we want to think that there's justice. We want to think, and we know that people who have access to funds are able to protect themselves, so much so that like with Epstein, like he'd been tried before and convicted, he's still like was missing from his prison cell, like flying to France, flying to wherever while he was supposedly serving time. I mean, our criminal justice system is a joke. Like, can we just be real here? It is a money-making machine for people who want to exploit people of color, and that's just flat out racist.
Yes.
It's an economic model. As long as people like Harvey Weinstein are protected when they're so clearly and they've been documented as disgusting, dangerous, we won't talk about dangerous members of society, and people who were falsely convicted, were stop and frisked, were, all of the people that you mentioned their entire lives are being spent, producing things for cents an hour so they can buy an overinflated toothbrush in the commissary. It's disgusting. It's not who we should be as a society. So I'm really happy that you put this together with a group of people, really great left activists.
Thank you very much. And we are obviously going to continue to push for these changes. We're expanding our website every day to try to answer more of these questions, because even when it comes to rape and murder, in a lot of cases, because they're poor, they have not been given access to, mental health treatment, for example. Also, even those who are just don't have mental illness, but for whatever reason are that certain way, there are a lot of reasons why our society is the way it is and why people behave the way that they do. So our intention is, for 10 for Justice, focusing on, abolishing police and prisons to be the start of something larger. So 10 Demands is an organization that we created in the process of creating 10 for Justice. And we plan as an organization to extend it even further to talk about 10 demands for economic justice, 10 demands for education, 10 demands for public health, because as you said, this is not the society we want to live in. And we have the power. We are the people, the 99%. There is strength in numbers. And, that can be seen as a result of the general strikes and things like that, where if we don't shop, if we don't work, the country doesn't run. So it's just a matter of being informed and being on the same side and leveraging mutual aid. And with all of that, we can really make a difference.
This is awesome. How can people help out? What can they do?
There's a lot of different ways. We're open to adding more people to our working groups. If you have a particular specialty, whether it's education or public health or economics, you can always reach out to 10 Demands on Twitter or info@10forjustice.com. We have a GoFundMe right now, which is covering some of the costs of the flyer printing and distribution, and is also going to go toward our applying for nonprofit status. If you're interested in petitions, we do have a change petition to support this. If you're interested, you can endorse the 10 Demands on our website. And you can always reach out to me directly. I'm Awkward Rap, AWKWORDRAP on Twitter. And strike up a conversation, because the more communication we have, the more myths are dispelled and the greater the understanding is of what abolition truly means. We do have a solution for all of these questions. People just think that we want an anarchist society where everyone gets to run around without repercussions. That's not what we're talking about at all. We're talking about stepping outside the prison box, thinking outside of that, and having different types of repercussions where people actually are held responsible to the parties that they harm, where we have intervention to prevent crime. This is not something where, this is not something that has not been thought about for decades. This is something that is certainly able to be implemented. It's just a matter of forcing it on the hands of our leadership.
Absolutely. I mean, people think this popped up overnight, and these are uprisings that have been in the works for decades. I mean, generations, actually, if you really want to get down to it. Slave uprisings. Yep. Awkward, amazing work. Thank you for coming on. Keep us in the loop. And I'm hoping that some of these leaders start to step up, and bit by bit, they start to realize what's on the line here.
Thank you so much. With people like you helping amplify our message, we have a lot greater likelihood of having success. So thank you for having me on.
Thanks to Linette Lopez of Business Insider and to Awkward the artist. Special thanks to our team, Dorsey, Kelly, and George, for making this show happen. We are growing little by little. Make sure to go to patreon.com/The Nomiki Show to invest in our show so that we can keep this show going and going strong and do more exciting things as well. I'll see you guys next week back in New York. Stay safe, stay well, wear your masks.